Hey, Brian. So I'm working at Soylent. I'm a business development person, and I'm also in the middle of starting a podcast that will be helping millennials basically tap into their definite optimist side of themselves. So abstracting from the book Peter Thiel, 0 to 1, where he talks about how the United States has shifted from being a definite optimist to being an indefinite optimist, the idea being that people think the future is getting better, but they don't really know how it's getting better, and they don't really have a role in making it better. So what advice would you have for my own podcast as well as other people who are looking to inspire the next generation of millennials to not go to McKinsey or Goldman Sachs, which can be great organizations, but ultimately they're squeezing value instead of creating value. So what advice would you have?
A couple things today about questions like these is I generally don't like to give advice, and I don't think other people should give advice, because I think advice is deceptively contextual. So I could answer this question and explain to you what my life is about or what I've experienced, but that has baked into it all the ways I think, right? My family situation, my friend situation, people who I've serendipitously ran into. And so I think the story that best illustrates this, so I'm sorry, this will be like a roundabout way to set the context. The story I like the best about this is one I used to tell at Braintree, which is don't be a monkey. So there's 5 monkeys in a cage, and there's a box of bananas up on from this ladder. And the monkeys see the bananas, and they run up to try to get the banana. But when they do, they get sprayed with cold water, which is a very unpleasant experience. And so that happens a few times. The monkey's like, okay, so this is a bad thing. I don't want to run and get the bananas, because I get sprayed with cold water, and it's really unpleasant. And so they take one monkey out and put a new monkey in, and the new monkey's like, wow, like there's a box of bananas. I'm going to get a new banana. And so he gets sprayed with cold water plus everyone else. So the tribe learns this experience that any monkey who tries to climb the ladder, you should grab them and pull them back down so you don't get sprayed by cold water. So pretty soon you replace all 5 monkeys. So now you have 5 monkeys in the cage, none of which have ever been sprayed by cold water. But if anybody tries to go up the ladder, they grab it and pull it back. So the new monkey comes in, and he talks to all the monkeys, and he says, "Sage monkey, you who have been here for 5 years in this habitat, please tell me, why do you stop monkeys from going up to the box?" They have no idea, right? The one simple question, why, would tear down their entire intellectual infrastructure of why they don't do that certain behavior. And I think in life, oftentimes, a simple way to tear down our entire mental infrastructure is just one question, why? What is the assumption stack that builds upon this, right? So in this question here, we're talking about a podcast, and you're talking about mental models, like how people process information. So if I'm a millennial and I say, what do I want to do? Do I want to do Goldman Sachs? Do I want to do a nonprofit? You basically are talking about mental models, right? How do I process information in the world? And I think that's actually an area that is a huge concentrated area of focus. So you're talking about Peter Thiel's book, right? And Peter Thiel offers up models of how to process information, how I build a business, how I understand the world. But I think the more valuable context on that is, what are your mental models? So when you ask the question, what are you assuming? What's your assumption stack? And so I'd say that in the millennials, right, that how they process information would be the most relevant thing to me. And so my response to them would be, so I spoke earlier today about the reason why our time and place is unique in humanity is that we can literally program our existence. So computer code, zeros and ones, ATCG, biology, like we can program everything in our world. And with that new creative power, we have these optionalities we never had before to program the world. That's the model I use to process information. So if I have these creative abilities to do so, how would I allocate my time and attention to doing so? So I did a really terrible job of answering your question. But I would say that the biggest focus on the millennials is what mental models are they using to process information? And then secondarily, what is the assumption stack they have? What are the whys? And if you can just press on a few whys, so when I talk to entrepreneurs, the people I invest in, we can have conversations in 6 minutes, and we can just destroy their world, right? I can just say, why this, why that, and think, oh, wow, like, yeah, got it, I can go. So I'd say it's more of a series of going to their thought process and asking them why they believe what they do. So that'd be my take.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Hey, a completely random question for you. So my question is for consumer apps, where you have to generate a lot of users and get a lot of users. Obviously, if you're a developer or a tech guy, you can build a prototype and run around and probably get hundreds or maybe a couple thousand users. But how do you solve the cold start problem, and especially a cold start problem for an app like that has Yelp or Foursquare kind of a deal where you have businesses and consumers. How do you build up that user base, or how do you?
Oh, basically a two-sided market.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
well, in general, two-sided market, but even if it's not a two-sided market, it's just a consumer app. Like, this whole terms of, creating this viral effect and, using these social media and stuff, you can go down that route, but it's not always successful. So and if you don't have a lot of money to market your product, what do you think a few things that one should do to kind of build that user base?
So could I re-summarize your question and say, how do you get customers with no money?
Pretty much.
Okay. So I had that problem at Braintree. I had no
Right.
money, and I needed to get customers. And so what I did is I started blogging. At the time, Dig, Reddit, and StumbleUpon were hot. And I basically went for the Achilles heel of the payments industry, which was dishonesty. And so I called everybody out. I said, these guys are doing everything that's dishonest. Here's what they're doing. Here's what they're doing it. And I just talked openly and transparently about the industry. I've linked to all my competitors who are doing good things as well and became an open book. And just said, the industry is messed up, and this is the way we can help you. And by being sincere and totally transparent with what my agenda was, we had people who were banging down our door, and we didn't have to market for the first 4 years of the company. We created this referral network.
How do you get your blog famous? Well, how do you get people to read your blog?
So I would write these articles, and I would put it on Dig, and it would go the top 1 or 2 position when that was still relevant, and we'd get a ton of incoming traffic, and people wanted to make sense. So I guess I'd say, what is the Achilles heel of your industry, and what are the tools available to you now to do that? Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Dave Oram from Future Earth. It's a UN-mandated platform for global sustainability research and implementation. And my question today was your opinion on geoengineering and how we balance the double-edged sword of creating these artificial geoengineering technologies which reduce atmospheric carbon, which is a benefit, but on the same side, we give people a reason not to get off our addiction to fossil fuels, and how do we balance that implementation of the technology?
Totally, yep. So this is, I love this question, Dave. Dave, right?
Yeah.
So, so planet Earth is a big ball of biology, right? You're biology, I'm biology, planet Earth is biology, and they're complex ecosystems. So we see this problem, for example, in medicine, where you create a compound and you throw it in the body, and you want it to affect cholesterol, but then you do something else, like Viagra, right? That was a total accident. And so, like this, when you start messing with complex ecosystems, you just don't know what the outcome's going to be. So I think, in short, we have to be extremely thoughtful and extremely careful. But I don't think the argument is, will it be done or should it be done? The tech is out.
Yeah.
We're going to do it.
So what platforms are out there to sort of have that conversation? Do you know any?
No, I don't. So I think my personal take on what's going to happen is, so once the technology is unleashed in society, as a civilization, we've never been able to pull back technology. Think of nuclear, right? So with the threat it poses to humanity, with our best efforts, we couldn't pull it back in and say, oh, shoot, that's out of the gate, right? Once we develop a technology, it's out. And so we can program biology, and we will program planet Earth on some scale and some, right? And so the question to me is, we have these societal institutions of reconciliation of how we solve our differences, and I think it really comes down to that, governance and company policies and ethics and our own ideologies. So it's a very complicated question, but I think the key principles are the technology is out. Now we have to deal with it because it's going to happen. So it doesn't make sense to go protest, and it just makes more sense to have our systems reconcile these risks and rewards.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Hey, Brian.
Hey.
So we have 2 extreme views about business. One extreme is Peter's here views where he says a business is not a business unless it's a monopoly.
Yeah.
The other extreme is Jason Fried. You don't have to grow, just chill and build a lifestyle business. Don't raise money. What are your views about business?
So I think it goes back to the monkey game, right? The context. So Peter has put out a mental model. Jason Fried has put out a mental model. But there's thousands of mental models in the world that have worked on how to build a business. And there's all those variations. And so I think what happens is sometimes people have these mental models, and they put themselves in that situation and say, well, I'm going to build a company like Jason Fried or like Peter Thiel, which one? And it's not the right thought process, because there's all these different variations of what you can do. And so I think for me, personally, as I think about life, I try to identify the model map, who thinks about what in which way, and what things appeal to me under my circumstances. But I think it's all about how you process information, right? But I think trying to narrow set ourselves on one of those models, it leads to a dead end. So I'd say if you're contemplating that question, understand the models you can think about it, and then pinpoint the one that resonates with you and your industry and your resources.
Could I ask, what was your model when you were building Braintree?
Yeah, so I was dead broke, couldn't pay my bills, I had no choice, and I stumbled into it. Yeah. I started out at 21, I decided I wanted to retire by the age of 30. And then with abundance of time and resources, I would go try to make the world a better place. So I had a goal, and the question was how I went there. And so, but I found payments by accident because I was broke and I had another startup fail. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. I know that you have an interest in life extension, and I assume you have an interest in radical life extension as well, although I know that might not be correct. And I was wondering what technologies related to life extension or specific strategies do you think are most promising to bring life extension life extension technologies that will increase human lifespans by more than 30, 40, 50 years?
Yeah. I think about it in two ways. I want to invest in a platform of creation. So the last radical shift in human longevity was through germ theory, when we figured out that tiny microorganisms cause infection. And once we figured out that you sterilize stuff and you wash your hands, right, and all those kinds of things, we extended life from mid-40s to mid-70s, the germ theory, right? And we've taken that so far now that we've actually pushed it to the other side, where we have these superorganisms. But, so my bets now are in platforms of creation that lead to the next one. And so, for example, genomics. I think that harnessing the genome coupled up with other data, microbiome and phenotype data, could be a platform for creation. That once you have this data set, you could have millions of creators on top of it using that data to figure out ways to extend it. So I don't want to bet on one technology. I want to bet on platforms that lead to a whole bunch of other things.
All right, thank you.
Genomics being one, CRISPR being another, but platforms like that.
Hey, Bryan.
Hey.
Got a question. I know one of the companies that you invested in is Hampton Creek.
Yeah.
Can you share with us your thoughts, predictions, or what you see in the future of food science, nutrition, and how it impacts us?
Yeah, so I think that on that, like they've digitized food, right? So biology is now programmable. And so they went out and they said, where can I find protein to consume? And now we have this production process where we feed chickens, chicken lay its eggs, the egg is transported to the store, I consume the egg. And they said, well, why do we have to do that? Like, why do you have to put all that time and energy into chicken? Why don't you just make protein from a plant-based protein? And so I think the big shift is that you can actually take code from biology and produce inputs. And so again, it's this platform of creation. And so I think that them and a whole bunch of other people are doing it, but it's how we are going to build our tools for the coming decades. So again, I make the bet on platforms if they're building out the database of those protein structures.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi, Bryan. I noticed you talk about mental models and about information processing more than most people. What are the most important, like, kind of mental level ups that you've encountered in your life?
Yes, I went through, I guess, a couple. Over the years, I guess, I used to think I was a very rational and logical person. And then I started reading, like, Dan Ariely's Predictably Irrational and Thinks Fast and Thinks Slow, and a whole bunch of other books like that. And I was like, wow, like, I'm so irrational, I'm so illogical, I'm a hypocrite. Like, I'm a disaster of a person. And it was like one of the biggest revelations in my entire life, and I just became self-aware to a point where I wasn't before. So those were big. And then also, I mentioned in the talk today that, so I grew up in a religious household. And the belief system that was taught to me was that planet Earth is fixed, and that we're on a predestined evolution of outcome. And that my responsibility in life was to play by a particular rule set and not to create the rules. And then I fell out with my faith, and I discovered that we can actually program existence, right, with these tools like biology and AI and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, it was like the most stunning discovery of my life. So I thought, wait a second, I'm going from this predestined world outcome to one where we actually, if we want to create a thriving humanity, no one's gonna do it for us. Like, it's us. We've got to build this thing, roll up our sleeves, and get to work. That was probably the biggest one. So once I realized I'm a disaster of a human, I can't think straight, I'm illogical, all that kind of stuff, it was basically reorienting my identity and aspirations of, why do I exist? Is there an afterlife? Is there a God? What do I care about this life? Like, why do I get up in the morning, right? All the questions that were burning inside of me. And so I basically, at the age of 34, had to recreate myself from scratch. Like, everything I knew was out the door. And I had to sit down, pen and paper, and say, why do I exist? And it was an amazing experience. And so I'll write more about that in the future, in the coming months, actually. But I had to recreate myself, and it was like this wonderful experience that I've never, ever felt happier or more motivated. So it's been a blessing, and I hope to share this. Others could potentially go through the same thing.
Thank you.
So I guess speaking of mental models, it sounds like this was a kind of revelatory experience for you waking up. And it sounds like some things like YC, 0 to 1 are all just saying you don't have a tracked life, you can actually pave your own path.
Yeah.
Is there a way to engineer or systematize this kind of belief or waking up in other people, and how are you thinking about that?
Oh, that's a great question. What's your take?
So I've actually seen, so one of the more recent examples is Elon Musk had the Wait But Why guy create an article about how Elon Musk thinks.
Yep.
He says cheffiness is a very important key. And he says that the chef actually looks at the first principles, the ingredients, and
Yeah.
creates things himself instead of following the cookbook while all the other cookbooks follow the place. I'm still working on this, so
Yeah.
I am pretty much just looking at all the different ways that people are incentivizing and making other people think in new ways. And
100%.
so another one is Harry Potter Methods of Rationality.
Yep.
I noticed you also went to EAG, which I attended.
Yeah.
And so I think there are different tracks of doing this, and I think just like mental models, it's contextual,
Yeah.
meaning you have to figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
And you can use these as aids, but ultimately you have to be able to say, this is a good way of looking at the world, but I think I need to tweak it or start completely from ground zero and look at
I
those
agree.
principles.
And it's a great point, and I like your suggestions. How people think is so underappreciated, right? So like I have these relationships in my life where I can call someone and I can I can say something and they say, wait a second, like, let's check that, and I think, oh, yes, like you just destroyed that. And so I think that there's more interactions we can do, even in the entrepreneurial community, for us to engage and pinpoint each other. Because sometimes I'll say something so shallow, right? I don't realize I've built it on 4 assumptions that are just totally false. And so the other thing I think I'll say one last thing on this is an insight that I love that I'm working on right now is that ideology precedes intelligence. That I think I'm working on this, but we think that our intelligence is superior to ideology. When in fact, I think, for example, if you take a position on climate change, I don't think any of us are really neutral, right? We are going to seek out information that confirms our own opinions. It's just how we function, right? And so the ideological structures we maintain within ourselves drives our intelligence and our models. And so I think there's a stack even there of how we think. And so I'm personally just very curious because I want to think as cleanly as possible, and all these little tools and tricks help me personally as I try to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Hi, Bryan. My name is Michael Baker, and I have a question about micropayments. I'm curious, I feel like this is a step down the evolutionary scale from life extension and mental models.
No, we all need to buy stuff, so.
Thanks, yeah. So to me, micropayments, the obvious answer is some sort of cryptocurrency or something like that.
Yeah.
But my question really is, what does the future landscape look like? What does the minor masses have to get past in order for this adoption to really start, getting past the early adopters into the next level?
Yeah. So I mean, it's funny because the payment networks, so the reason why micropayments don't work is because Visa and MasterCard and the others charge high fees, right? They could change their fee structure to make micropayments work.
Right.
Like, that's just a simple fix.
Oh, they probably should. That's good.
Right? Like, I just pay and so if they would change fee structures, it's just solved, right, in that ecosystem.
You're right.
But you're right, these other tools are emerging, but it's been a problem that's not been cracked for a decade or two. I remember when I was building Braintree, like someone was always coming up raising money for micropayments, but no one could crack it. But like blockchain is a great tool to use for that. But I don't know, it's a big ecosystem problem, and I don't know what's going to crack it.
Got it, thanks.
Yeah, good luck with it though if you're going to solve it.
Hey Bryan, I was really impressed by your talk this morning.
Thanks.
And by the way, my name's Matt Fisher, and for the past 4 years, I've been working on adding technology to asthma management.
Mm-hmm.
And we've created some tools that can kind of predict when a kid's about to have an asthma attack. But about a year ago, we thought to ourselves, like, we're spending time trying to control something. Why don't we spend time trying to cure something?
Yeah.
And so we launched Crowd Cure Asthma 2020 and set a deadline. And what we found through consumer-based research is that there's 3 areas that could lead to the cure, which are how we interact with our environment, the microbiome, and genetics.
Yeah.
All things you mentioned earlier today. So
Yep.
my question for you is, where do you see the research going in the microbiome over the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah. I'll give you an example that's not the microbiome. So there's this company called NeuroPace that has been working on epilepsy for the past 15 years. And they've created this device. I actually sat in and watched a brain surgery last week. It was amazing. Like, carved open the skull and put this electrode on the brain. And they have these algorithms for seizure detection. So a seizure commences, and then they pulse the brain and they can quell 60% of, I think roughly 60% of seizures in people who just can't function in life because seizures are so bad. And then I think someone put the seizure control mechanism on a crowdsourced website. They had people try to take a crack at the algorithm. And I think within like a matter of a week or two, they made some revolutionary insights in terms of new algorithms that quell seizures to a degree that was like 200 or 300% better than the other. So like it was like roughly that data. And so on these questions of like what you're talking about, of algorithms, of predictive algorithms, of determining how to either quell or to cure or whatever, it's going to be, I think, a two-pronged approach. One is the data you have to work with, right? So you can only work with good data. And number two is your algorithm development. And you're always going to be better off in a broader field, having more people give input on the algorithm development, because inside, it's just hard to develop those algorithms. So if I were you, I guess I'd roughly be thinking, one, how do I get the best data, the purest data? And number two, how do I construct a strategy for algorithm development that gets me to the end I want? That'd be my take offhand. What's your take? Well, how would you respond to that?
Okay. I think that's like great advice right there. As far as like you mentioned where they found out like clean the tools, you're causing more people to get sick.
Yeah.
Right now with asthma, we're finding out like it's too clean. Now we need more germs in our life,
100%,
you know?
100%.
So it's, I don't know, to me it's just like, I feel like there's a lot of different theories. Now it's like, how can we move forward past the theories?
Totally agree,
testing. Yeah. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi,
hey.
Nice to meet you. So I want to go back to the monkeys.
Yeah.
So say you were the new monkey put in the cage, right?
Yeah.
And you realized that it's not getting the banana that gets you sprayed, but it's touching the top rung of the ladder.
Yeah.
How do you convince the other 5 monkeys that that's the problem? And when they're saying, no, you're just the young monkey, they don't spray the youngest monkey, that must be what it is.
Yeah. So I mean, one, you have to identify the assumption stack, right? So we believe that if one of us goes up the ladder, we're going to get sprayed by water. Does that mean if 5 of us go up the ladder, that we get sprayed by water? Is there an algorithm that determines when we get sprayed by water, right? And then once you run through all those different scenarios, when is the water triggered, right? So at least you understand the rules of the game. Then you can say, now what do? Do we overthrow the people who now control the game? Do we fight a revolution, right? But first is understanding the data set, and then 2, devising your strategy around the data set.
Okay, thank you.
That'd be my take.
Just listening to you, I can kind of get the sense that you think greater than just like 70 or 90 years that you're going to be on this earth, and you're kind of looking like 1,000 years ahead.
Yeah.
And then I look at the valley, and you have, I was that person as well in my early 20s, like sell the company, buy a Ferrari, go on that date. How do you convince people that there's more to life than the 70 or 90 years that they're here, and their impact could be more than 1,000 years? The impact could, like Einstein's impact is going to be more than like the 100 years he's here. It's going to be thousands of years. People are going to remember that. Like Elon Musk has that, in the way he talks and what he does, and I think you do too, from the way I listen to you. How do you convince other people to be like that, not to be the person who's building the next social startup, to share like the holiday you took on the beach and you want to like impress your friends? How do you convince people of that?
So it's an intensely personal question for me, because like one, I believe in the ecosystem of solutions. Like I think that people working in apps and gaming and acting and any profession, we're all equal contributors, because innovations made in one area go to other areas. And so I try not to never single out any particular area as being more worthy or justifiable than the other. We're in this broad ecosystem of creation.
So I think with just adding to your mental models, like everyone has their utility function.
Yes.
And so how do you...
We had a cut. Okay. I love the question though. Thank you, everybody.